5:30, and I know people will still be trickling in, but I thought I'd go ahead and get started because I have a sort of long introduction. So first, I'd like to thank the sponsors of this lecture, and that's the Art and Design Visitor Committee, the HRI Supplemental Event, African American Studies, the Department of History, the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, and Krannert Art Museum. I'd also like to begin with a land acknowledgement, because although we're meeting up virtually, I'm coming to you from the University of Illinois, as are many of our visitors online. So I'd like to begin today by recognizing and acknowledging that we are on the lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Odawa, Sauk, Muskegee, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. These lands were the traditional territory of these native nations prior to their forced removal. These lands continue to carry the stories of these nations and their struggles for survival and identity. As a land-grant institution, the University of Illinois has a particular responsibility to acknowledge the peoples of these lands, as well as the histories of dispossession that have allowed for the growth of this institution for the past 150 years. We are also obligated to reflect on and actively address these histories and the role this university has played in shaping them. This acknowledgement and the centering of Native peoples is a start as we move forward for the next 150 years. I would like to ask you, if you haven't already, to mute your mic, everyone except for Jim. And if you have questions, you can either drop them in the chat as the lecture is going, or at the end there will be time for a Q&A. But before we get going, I'd like to just do a brief sort of introduction of myself and Jim as our speaker. I am Maureen Warren, Curator of European and American Art here at Krannert Art Museum. And I was introduced to Jim's work by way of a historical piece in Cam's collection. And that's this work by an unknown enslaved artist in Edgefield, South Carolina, sometime around the mid-19th century. This work we brought into the collection for our decorative arts collection. And in trying to understand the tradition of face jugs and sort of where they had come from, I was drawn to the tradition as it lives today and really excited about the jugs that Jim has been making for the past 35 years. And if you find yourself on campus sometime in the next few weeks, you can see this historical work, as well as a work by Jim that Krannert Art Museum recently acquired down in our open storage. And those works will be reinstalled in the Bow Gallery soon. So if you're not finding them in open storage, head up to the Bow Gallery. This is a better look at the jug that we just acquired, entitled Disappearing Black Man. And from what I understand, Jim will be talking about this a little bit today. So the rest of his work, I'm not going to provide any sort of commentary. I'm just going to show you some images so you have a sense of some of his craftsmanship, some of his objects before he speaks to us today. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to our speaker, Jim McDowell. Jim, we've still got you on mute. If you'll unmute there.
Okay, should be good, right?
I'm done now? Okay. Well, good evening to everybody. I'm Jim McDowell. I am also known as the Black Potter. And this is the first time I've ever done a lecture. I don't really know if I'm much of a lecturer, but I can talk about face jugs. So that's what I'm going to do. I got a bunch of stories and things that have helped me and have lined me up with how I came to be a face jug person. I'm talking today about what my face jugs represent. The lives of enslaved people abducted from Africa, beginning more than 400 years ago, and all my descendants, of whom I'm one, and what they lived through. Beginning with the Middle Passage, slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, Jim Crow South, the Great Migration, and the Civil Rights era, leading all the way up to today to the Black Lives Movement. A few years ago, when I realized and recognized the Black Lives Movement, I began to write BLM on my jugs. Controversy started. Everyone wanted to say all lives matter. Yes, that's true. But I remembered a story that I read in the Bible. Jesus told it about himself, about a shepherd who had 100 sheep and one was missing. He left the 99 and went after the one, went up to the dark mountainous area, dangerous, and rescued that one sheep because that was the one that was in danger and that was the one that needed help. But 35 years ago, that's not the reason I started making face jugs. I started making face jugs because I wanted to know my people and to be able to tell their story. And the story was heavy. The first time I ever heard about a face jug was at a family funeral. Now, those of you who are in the Black culture, you understand when the grown folks are talking, shut up and be quiet. Well, Granddaddy McDowell, Boris McDowell, was a tombstone maker in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And I was very proud of him that he had a business back in the 1900s. Well, he was relaying a story about funerary practices that the Black people did. And he's talking about a face jug. I had never heard about a face jug. So when there was a moment of pause, I broke in and I asked him, what is a face jug? And he began to tell me about the face jugs made in Africa, that they made face jugs and use them for protection and to honor ancestors and to put them at the doorposts and all kind of things like that. And then he relayed the fact that we had an ancestor who was 4 times removed, great aunt Evangeline, who lived in Jamaica, and she was a potter, and she made face jugs. We don't have any of her face jugs, but the story has been laid down to us. You know, so still, I didn't make face jugs. I didn't make face jugs for a long time after that. So I was in the Army, and here's another story, how I came to be.
No.
Yep. Okay. Can I continue? Okay. So in the Army, I was in the Army in Germany, Ansbach, Germany, years 1972. The Baden-Meinhof gang is blowing up Army bases. They put me on the gate that night and gave me a M16 with 2 rounds, one in my chamber and one in my pocket. And the order was, no one comes in here after 2 a.m. Okay, I did okay till 2 a.m. Then this little Black man pulled up in a civilian car and he said he was coming in. And I told him my order and he said he was still coming in. And I pulled the rifle on him and put a round in the chamber and told him if he took another step, I'd have to shoot him center mass, sir. Well, that's the most dangerous thing in the world with a GI with an order. And the guy got scared and he left. The next morning, they called me in the office, wanted to know, what did you do last night? I said, well, this guy came up and he said he was going to come in. I was going to shoot it because that was my order. So then they kept questioning me, and the guy my sergeant who was in charge of me said, McDowell, get out of the room. Go ahead, get outside. So I put my ear to the door and I was listening to what they said. And the captain said, what does McDowell do in his spare time? Vietnam era, everybody comes back from Vietnam, they smoking drugs and, you know, acting crazy. They said he spends his time in the craft shop. You said, what? They said, send him there all the time. So that's how I got into crafts. The Army paid me to be a craft shop worker. And that's how I got started with pottery. Yeah, the guy was a general. I forgot to say that. Yeah, he's okay today. But anyway, they had a pottery wheel in there. It was a kick wheel, and I never got a chance to use it because there was no one to teach me. So when the weekend came, I went to Nuremberg, which was about 20 miles from Ansbach, and there were German potters around who had a pottery studio. And I walked in, and I was looking around, and I pantomimed. I wanted to learn the wheel. I showed them. And I knew the word nine means no. So I said that 3 times, and each time I said it, they said no. So finally, somebody comes out the back room with the broom. And I'm thinking, gosh, this is prejudice. You wanted me to sweep the. So I remember my father said, if you want to learn it, you'll do what they say. So for 3 Saturdays in a row, I swept the studio. On the 4th Saturday, they were firing the wood kiln. They took me in the back and showed me how to fire the wood kiln and how to. They finally got me on the wheel. But what they really liked was the fact that I don't smoke, I don't drink. I had a cigarette and a booze ration. I would take them 3 cartons of cigarette a month and 2 bottles of Jim Beam. They loved that. They loved that. So that was the German things. And so I went home and I wanted to learn pottery. I knew that I could tell the story of my people through the medium of clay, because this was my connection. You know, my early jugs, they were horrible. I would write things on them like "do good always" or "have a nice day." You know, my jug have evolved when I started to learn about slave potter David Drake, a Black man who was literate, who wrote on his jug and he signed his name at a time when Black people were not allowed and it was against the law. And so I learned that. And over the years, I have learned the spiritual and the connection behind the Congolese and Edgefield pottery. One of the things that I had to learn was the grave markers, you know. And then I understood something, because I understood Africa ancestor worship, the islands, Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, voodoo, hoodoo, and the United States, Christianity. The missionaries quickly tried to convert the slaves to Christianity because the premise was, if you were a good slave, that means you could go to heaven and you'd be a better person. So they amalgamate, and that's my big word for the day. They combined those 3 religions and they came up with a face jug. Now, sometimes face jugs would show up on graves, but usually it was things that you had. You had a favorite pot, a plate, a bowl, piece of jewelry, piece of wood, anything that they felt your spirit possessed was in it, they would put it there. But 20 years ago, Black art was not considered to be recognized by museums and its importance, you know. So why did my ancestors make this? And why did they continue? You know, I guess about 8 years ago, maybe 10, I was on a history detective program. And a friend, April Hines, her grandfather had found a face jug. And how did it get up in Pennsylvania from down here, down south? Well, they found it in the doorpost, or the area where the pottery was, the porch was. And so she called me and I told her who it was. I said, it's an Edgefield pottery because of the tobacco spit glaze, slave made, features and everything, kaolin eyes and stuff. And so that was a start of that. And then when they started to do the program, because the guy that was the person of the history detective program. He came to my house and we actually made a jug together. And then someone said that the face jug was made to carry water to the field. That little teeny thing, it couldn't carry nothing. And slaves were not permitted to carry anything to the field. So that ended that one, you know. So my departure from the face jugs, when I started making them, I started to feel, you know, and one of the things that I was telling my wife, Jan, I said, I'm not a deep thinker, but what I do have is deep feelings and emotions. And how do I take something that's an idea and make it concrete? I'm glad you asked that question. What you do is you have to feel, you have to tap into some kind of inner source that you can have that idea. I believe that in my DNA, the ancestors are there. I can tell you that I'm doing a lot of reading. I'm doing a lot of studying. I'm doing a lot of going places. And so I wake up at night sometime and have to write it down, because if you don't write it down, it's going to go away. One of the things, the stories that I came up with, and I got a face jug I want to show you real quick. This is a first responder angel. I mean, look how ugly he is. Got a cigar in his mouth. This was from the Boston Marathon incident. And I made him because we have this opinion that angels are beautiful. We're angels with all our bumps and scars and everything. And this angel has teeth and he's smoking a cigar. And I wrote on the back of them, First Responder Angel, Station House 6327, USA. Now, Jan told me that the station houses usually have one number. So I combined 4 station houses, 6327. And that's how that angel came to be. And, you know, this is in my personal collection. And I call this one Old Pa in honor of my dad. This is Old Pa. So I told you, and the cigar is very important too. Slaves could be 90 years old and still called the boy. But when you were allowed to smoke and have a cigar in your mouth, that means you have arrived. You're not down as a boy. You're a man now. So I realized that the slaves heard the stories. They had to go to church. They heard about Jesus. They heard about Christianity. They heard about evil spirits. They heard about the Israelites being freed from slavery. They heard about the Israelites crossing the river Jordan, going through the Red Sea first and then crossing the river Jordan. So they had all these spiritual connotations in their head. Now, the face jug with the wings came about because the stories were when a slave would disappear, people wanted to know what happened to him. They didn't find him. The dogs went out and people were looking for him. And they said, Jesus gave us wings and we flew away. And, you know, to this day in Black mythology, that is a story that's there. Whether it's true or not, I know they disappeared. I know they were not seen again. So I'm inspired by the ancestors. Sometimes I get so enamored with making the jugs and the stories and things. And Jan says, "Hun, we got to get out of here for a while. You're getting too crazy. So we'll go away for a while so I can get back to it." But I was inspired so much by Dave, Slave Potter Dave. I was doing a show in Winter through Museum in Delaware, and they had just had a show of Dave's pot. And I begged them, please let me see these jugs. So they took me downstairs in the basement, put me on a rug, made me put on gloves, and handed me 2 of Dave's pots, one at a time. What a thrill that was, to actually feel the pots that he made, to put my fingers through the writing that he did, and to understand that this enslaved person is still speaking to me today. I'll never forget Dave's pots. I'll never forget that. So when I talk about Dave, I write on pots. I think about the stories. You know, I honor Black people. Fannie Lou Hamer, Martin Luther King, Mae Jemison, Dr. Mae Jemison, one of the first female astronauts. John Lewis, Colin Powell. I put quotes from them on the back of the jugs, because the one thing that we want to do is remember. I think that one of the things that people are talking about, this critical race theory, I live it every day. I can't change. I'm Black. My grandson was here for 2 months, and he's living with he's a mixed race child. He's living in a white family. I've tried to show him what it means to be Black. And he said, but granddaddy, your skin is not Black. I said, well, if you look at the census, I'm classified as Black. So, but the Black is more than the color. It's the way you live. It's the food, it's the music, it's the culture, it's the dress, it's everything. And we, as Black people, have built this country. And face jugs are important. I'm so glad that archaeologists and historians and the museums are now finding out and looking at our history. I mean, face jugs go a long way back. Now, we have changed, and one of the things that I believe that I am is the bridge between them and me. They had clay, they had kilns, wood kilns, but they don't have the advantages that I have, like the materials that I can have, the different ways that I can fire my pots in a wood kiln, a gas kiln, a sawdust kiln, or I know about coefficients of glaze. I know how to mix glazes and get the colors that I want. And so this is so important. Let me hand this to Jan. Yeah. This is so important because when you start to make a face jug, you want to tap into your culture. And this is the problem I have with the other potters that make face jugs. When I first saw face jugs, and it was a long time from the time that I heard about face jugs when I was 13 till I started making face jugs. And when I first saw making face jugs, I said, this looks like a Toby jug that the white potters used to make to satirize the rich. But when I first made face jugs, I wanted them to look like us, like me, the big noses, ropey lips, the ears, the hair, all the scarification, the things that we do. And so when I did this, I started to, change the jugs around a little bit. So also, I started to learn how to make what I call shorties. When I first made the face jugs, and for a long time, I wasn't concerned about selling them. I just wanted to make the jugs, and I had to make the jugs. If I didn't make the jugs, I'd go crazy. I was just so enamored with making them and learning how to make a vessel and how to make a something strong and constructed. And then when I started to make them, and I started making shorties, the shorties are small, they're about like that. And shorties don't have a lot of writing on them. They have a word, maybe they would be stinky. And I told my grandson, I said, he's 11 years old, and he didn't want to take a shower sometime. I said, you know what? You're getting ready to go into school. You're getting ready to go into not elementary, middle school. And I said, listen, you can't give them any ammunition, because the first day of school and they find out you're stinky, that's your name until you die. So I bought him 72 hour deodorant and taught him how to take showers. I hope he's doing okay. But shorties, vote. I didn't say vote for a particular, Democrat, or just vote. Love, just love everybody, And so that's what the shorties do. But I've tried to, because the face jugs are ugly. Slavery was ugly. And I want my voice on the face jug. I am an angry Black man in a lot of ways. But I realized early on that I can't beat everybody, and I can't out-talk them or shoot them or whatever. So I started writing on the jugs things that were important to me and maybe would be important to them, people that would get them. I was doing a show in Pennsylvania. I think it was Middleton somewhere. And the lady came up to me with the jug. She said, I can feel your energy. And, you know, that kind of put me back because I do try to imbue my energy into the jug. You know, when I did Trayvon, that thing just really tore me up, made me angry. So I went to the studio to make the jug. I wanted to honor him. I wanted to remember him. And I wanted to enshrine him some way. So I never had done this kind of jug before. I cut an opening into the middle and put the face inside. And then Jan said, well, you know, he had a hoodie on and it had strings. So I made a hoodie. And, you know, I made the jug and I got it fired and everything. And I put it away. And then what happened was when it was photographed, it looked like a shrine. And I was happy with that because that was a turning point in my life about making the jug and having a story to tell. Lately, I've got this one here that I want you to see. This is the big one. This one speaks of shooting in the schools. I wrote on the back, we can't protect our guns before we protect our children. And this is talking about Florence and Parkland and all the school shootings. The one thing that I realize when I do the jugs is that I am the bridge. I've said it before. I bring them here with me and I use the same materials, change stuff. But I was remembering like about a couple months ago, I was doing a jug and I was trying to figure out how to put a certain design on it or something. And I said to myself, where did you see that? And then in my mind, a voice said, dummy, you didn't see it. You made it up. You're the one who's supposed to lead the way now. So, I mean, you know, I'm not the only one making face jugs, but I'm the only one making face jugs related to my ancestors. And so, you know, I haven't seen it. I have to make it. I have to invent it. It has to be do it. So one of the things about the face jugs, history, the story, what is it? Why do we control it? Why do we want to say this? Well, the one thing about history that I know is you have to be able to tell the story in such a way to make it relevant. But the story is not to be forgotten. History should not be repeated. We don't want to do the stuff again. And so when I make the jugs, I hope that they have a life to go out into people's lives and to touch and to motivate and to, you know, sometimes people get mad at me. I'm glad that you get mad. That means I made you feel something, you know, because I want to feel something. I'm not concerned with the deep theological thoughts about how you do it and why you do it. I do it because I have to do it. My body, my mind is always on my people. And I always think about them. I think about the, you know, when I said about the Middle Passage and stuff, and I thought about the Middle Passage. And I thought that when the ship left the shores of Africa and to the ship, and the ship left and started getting into the deep ocean, sharks followed it. The people died, the Black people died. And then when they would bring them on the board to, on deck to exercise them, they were chained up, sometimes 5 or 10 together. Several would jump overboard and kill themselves. So I am a descendant of the people who survived the Middle Passage. And I have a responsibility to tell this story. Let me give this to Jan. And one of the things that we have to do when we tell that story is remember, the ancestors demanded. I want to show you another jug. It's a seed carrier. Seed carrier. And she says, seed carrier, I bring change. When the women were put on the ship, they knew they were in capture, in in the slave holding pen, they had planted seeds in their head. But before I go there and tell you that story, I got to remember that I read a book called Farming While Black by Lee Pennington. And that book just ignited me because it talked about the rice culture. All the rice in this country came from Africa. Slave catchers would go to an area in Africa where the people raised rice and capture them and bring them back to South Carolina, Louisiana, wherever they were, because they knew how to irrigate, how to take the salt water and to irrigate it with fresh water. They knew all about that. You know, it's in Senegal. And that's the one reason. And when I read this book called Farming While Black, Lee Pennington turned me on to another book called Black Rice. And Black Rice talks about genetics of the rice and how the Asian rice is different from the black rice. The black rice was more tolerant, was able to go long periods without being irrigated. They could even do it on dry land too. And so that's one of the things when you talk about the culture of the music and the food, we brought a lot of food here. We brought the rice, we brought the gumbo, we brought the squash and the other things like that. But the one thing that I wanted to understand about when you make things like this is that okra. I love okra. I used to grow okra. You can't let it get too big because then it gets gummy. Jan says I hate it because it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger in the mouth. But I love to fry okra. That's some of the things that I like about it. Now, when you talk about face jugs, one of the things you have to understand as far as my culture is concerned, it was a religious connotation. Never made to make money, never. Always celebrate to embody the spirits, because African people, they had spirits for everything. And they celebrated things and they commemorated things that they remembered. When I started, I was making them because it was the only thing keeping me sane. Now I've been discovered and people are buying them in museums and galleries and things. It still makes me happy, but then it's like, why did it take this long? Well, one of the things that has done is my ancestors never had the ability to acquire property, kills, clay, tools, things like that. What this discovery of me has done, I'm now able to build my own kiln. At this time, I'm building a gas wood kiln in my backyard. Now I can control it. I can say when I'm going to fire. Another story. David Hovland, a good friend of mine from Pennsylvania. I was in college at Mount Aloysius Junior College, and the art program was dying, and so they said, go over there to IUP. So I took adult education class. I never studied under anybody else. But anyway, David was there, and David's a little white guy, and his wife is the granddaughter of Alfred Benz, who is the founder of Alfred University. So David said, okay, I see that you're excited. I see that you're like really want to do this. But let me tell you, and David used the N-word. He said, Jim, you're gonna be the only nigger potter there. I was not offended because this is my friend. He's using the word in the correct way. He said, you have to learn how to do what they need to do. You have to bring wood. We had a wood fire one time and somebody brought some plywood and some particle board. They didn't know what wood was. And he said, you have to take shifts no one else wants, like the one from 12 to 6. And you have to bring food too. I didn't know that was an unwritten thing, but I would bring food, bring dry wood. Had a friend that had a sawmill, and I had a little pickup truck. I would bring the sawmill, from the sawmill, cutoffs of kiln-dried hardwood. In fact, this was in Pennsylvania, but the wood was sold down here in Hickory. They made furniture, and when I would show up with this wood, The kiln would usually be stalled about 1200 degrees because it's a point where it can't get over, you know. When they would start to throw that dry wood in there, wow, over the top it would go. And that was one of the things that I learned. So David taught me that. And I love the fact that my whole pottery life, it's been white people that have helped me. I remember when I took some classes, when I came back from the service, I took some classes from a lady in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And now Johnstown was a little sleepy city at the time. And the lady that was gonna teach was worried that I would hurt the white girls that were taking. I said, look, all I want to do is learn. And so she said, okay, I'll take you. So after 8 weeks of lesson, they were all talking about where they were going to go to summer school. Well, everyone there was talking about Alfred. I couldn't afford Alfred. There was no way. So I looked in the Ceramics Monthly magazine, and they had events and things that were happening. And there was a guy that had a workshop in Ware, New Hampshire. And so I signed up for it and went there. And up until this point, my ex-wife didn't want me associated with white people. She said, they're going to hurt your feelings. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. But I'm adventuresome. I got to go. I can't sit here. So I went to Ware. Now I'm standing at the bus stop in Ware, and these guys drove up, these white guys, nice car and everything. They said, who are you? Because it was football camp to the New England Patriots or whatever was up there. And I said, I'm going to a pottery workshop. They said, what? And I started telling them about pots. They said, man, they're going to think you a pot dealer. Let us take you where you were going. It was only a couple miles down the road. I had the best time. I learned so much about pottery, about how to process clay, how to make things, how to fire. I'm still in touch with David Robinson to this day because I stayed another week because I got so much. I didn't know nothing about pottery at all. I didn't know, I thought I knew. I had read Pioneer Pottery. I had read all these books and I had tried, but I didn't know. And David told me about it. And so this is the one thing that I have to say about me. I can't sit still. I can't not do what I got to do. You know, now Maureen put a pot up called The Slave. Maureen, can you put that pot up again? The Slave? I'd appreciate it. Well, if you can't, don't worry about it. The Slave is that one there. The Slave was a pot that I made, and I was starting to understand the spiritual and emotional aspect of doing the pots. I had finished the pot. It was beautiful. It was finished. And I said to myself, why did they beat these people for no reason? Why did they hit them? Why did they brutalize them? Why did they commit atrocities to them? I wanted to feel it. I took a clothes hanger and I balled it up and I beat this jug. This is what it looked like. And it made me cry because it was emotional. I punched it, I hit it, I screamed at it, and then I hid it away. I didn't want to show it. And finally, Jan said, you got to put that thing out there. Well, a friend of mine from New York, Randall Morris from the Calvin Morris Gallery came and he took it to New York. And he had a show for me. I was in a show. And Randall said it was a snowy, I think it was in January, snowy day. And someone came in and felt that pain and plopped down the money for that jug. And it was more than I had ever would ask for. So this is the connection that I have with the emotional content, you know, and this is why I do this. This is why I continue to do, and I've gotten crazier. You know, I think some people are offended by it, but I don't have much time left, so I want to bring this one out. Okay, you can put me back there. This is a jug I did, I guess about 12, 14 years ago. And this was a jug that I saw in the Jet magazine. I saw a picture. This is Emmett Till. This is the side before they brutalized it. They shot him. They put a chain around his neck. They tied railroad ties to him. They just brutalized this child. They knocked his eye out. I was 14 years old at the time. And I saw it in Jet magazine. His mother said, I want them to see my baby. I did that not to scare people, not to make them mad, but I want them not to do this again. Years later, I found out that the boy did nothing wrong. He was mannerable in the store. He didn't say anything wrong to the person. But I had to commemorate that jug. I had to do it because it needs to be told. Also, here's another one. I think everybody remembers Rodney King. This is Rodney King, and I was angry with this one. They beat that boy, and they kept on beating him. Then they got off, and then what did Rodney say? Can't we just get along? Black people don't want to kill you. Black people want to be friendly. But Rodney was just that dynamic man. He died too soon. He got too much money and he went crazy with it. So I want to talk about the disappearing black man. The disappearing black man came about because so much of our society was obscuring Black pride and Black men and women. And we're being obscured and being pushed off the scene. And I wanted to do something to elevate us, to bring us to a place where we would feel good about ourselves. When I did this, when I told a friend of mine who's a potter, she said, if you disappear, we will look for you. Well, I'm just one of many, you know. But the disappearing black man spoke of that arts about not being able to be seen, not being able to be heard, not being able to be a part of society. So this is why I did the disappearing black man, you know. And so I'm going to talk about a few more jugs. Dr. Mae Jameson, she is wonderful jug. And on the back of her jug, it said, don't be limited by other people's imagination. Don't be limited. And she was not limited. She became a doctor. She went in outer space and everything. So that's why I do stuff like that. I try to do the scarification. I try to do the different things that would accentuate the form. And so Dr. Mae Jameson, and I've done several more. So the last jug that I want to show you is not a jug. The last jug, the last pot is a pot about the doorway of no return. There's a family in there. Look at them. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what's happening to them. They're in the slave barrack room, they call it, the slave quarters. Look at them. And I did this because I'm a descendant of those people. I don't know how many of them made it. I wanted to honor them. I wanted to remember them because that's important. That was the start of the journey that got me where I am today. And that's why I do these jugs. That's why I do it, because I want to tell the story. I want to keep telling the story as long as I can. And most of the jugs I make today recognize people who have overcome great obstacles and speak volumes about the conditions we find ourselves in and ways to overcome. One of the things I'm learning really strongly is that we need to be empowered to be able to buy land, to be able to get money, and to be able to do the things we want to do, and to take care of ourselves and our own people. And this is what's been happening to me. Now, I'm tired of talking now. And so I hope I've done a good job. I hope that you guys like what I've said. So Ian, I'm gonna let you come on in here with the Q&A. So whatever you want to talk. Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
I'd like to have anybody ask questions in the chat or turn on your camera and your microphone and ask Jim questions directly. Feel free to engage us.
Well, I'm gonna give a shout out to my friend Randy. I saw he was here. Randy, keep on making those jugs, man. Huh?
Jim, there's a question here that says, is there a significance to the relationship between the physical object and identity?
There's a great correlation between the physical and the object. The one thing is you take an inanimate piece of material and imbue it with your spirit. The ancestors did this. They took wood and stone and clay, and they had ceremonies and rituals where they imbued it with the power. I mean, this was some powerful stuff. You wasn't allowed to touch this because it would kill you, they thought. You know, so yeah, there's a great correlation between the object and what you feel about it, what you think about it. And David, hello, good to see you. Okay, I can see. So any more questions? Any more comments? Any more criticism? I like criticism. Come on.
Randy, do you have a question?
Jim, I have a question here. This is Randy. How you doing?
Hey, Randy, how you, man?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for the shout out.
Yeah.
Hey, I was great talk. Thanks for it was great hearing you and learning more today. I was wondering if there was if you have any kind of connection to material in your work, like your use of, you know, what you use to make teeth in some of your pieces, and do you have like a connection to local material, like local clay? Is there significance to it within your work?
I do. I have been able to go dig some clay and process it, and because it's such labor intensive, I don't use it complete. I just mix it with the other clay. Also, the china is from the antique shop. I get china plates and I break them up. And it has to be china, and I break them up because I don't like to use the kaolin. The kaolin is too white, and I want teeth that have coloration and crookedness and stuff like that. And I saw your jug the other day, and I liked what you did with the white because it was like kabuki. It looked so wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, I do use raw material, and I use glass too. I get stained glass pieces from people, and I put them on the eyebrows, and they stream down like tears, like pottery tears. So, you know. Now, one thing I got to tell you about Randy. Randy fires his pots in the Anagama kiln for days at a time, and the ash builds up and runs up. The most beautiful thing. I love doing that, Randy, but I'm getting too old to stay up all night.
You're never too old to make pots, man.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, man, for coming in. I appreciate it. Somebody says thank you so much for the love.
Jim, we have a question about the relationship between face jugs and memory jugs.
Okay, yeah. The memory jug, I've never really made a memory jug, but the face jugs are part of a memory, you know, a memory from long time ago. I think a memory jug would be within the last 10, 15 years of things significant in your life. But what I have done and what I have been doing is I've been able to, someone wrote me a couple months ago, said, do you ever do a jug and address transgender? Well, I had 2 transgender people in our church. So I started to talk to them about it, and I learned how to say, what are your pronouns? And I started to say things like, look, we need to stop killing transgender people. Somebody says, I wonder why you could face jugs so ugly. They're ugly because they were supposed to scare the devil away from your grave so your soul could go to heaven. You know, and that's one of the reasons they're ugly. And ugly is beauty. You know, in the ugliness is beauty. Yeah. Anything else?
Could you tell us about your glazes and your firing methods and your kilns and how you choose what you're working with in a material sense?
Okay, well, the glazes are basically glazes that I've learned over the years. Like David said, I had to learn how to take the low part to be at other people's kilns. I learned how to make glazes like chinos and glazes like that. And I learned how to transpose the glazes to the different firing temperatures. Most of it, when you do in a wood kiln, you're not controlling. You're going for high fire, cone 2350 degrees. So, but right after the friends of mine, that had kills, they got so big they couldn't. I couldn't be with them anymore. So what they did was, I have electric kills, so I've been low firing stuff down to cone 6 with 2200 degrees. But now I have a kill. So you're going to see some pots now that's going to blow your socks off, because now I'm going to make glazes that I've never seen before and use materials that I've never seen before, because potters always want to think, well, what'll happen if I do it this way? You know, and someone told me years ago I was a great potter. I said, yeah, okay. I fired up a whole load of greenware at the cone 6 temperature, blew up the whole kiln. I've blown the door off a kiln. I've done all kinds of things. I'm a great potter because I've made mistakes. As a potter, you have to make mistakes. In life, you make mistakes, but pick yourself up and get going again. Keep going, keep going. Any more questions?
Jim, this is Jerry Kettler from Quincy. And
Hey,
I just
Jerry.
want, how are you doing?
Okay.
And I see your beautiful wife, Jan, in the mirror once in a while that she's
Yeah.
helping.
She's here.
I know. Hey, and I just want you to let you know your face jug arrived to my house today, and I've already put it on the mantle.
Okay.
And I can't tell you how enlightening this class that you've done today has been. I think we've all enjoyed it.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Gary. Good. Yeah. It's so nice to be able to have people want your work and understand it and understand the meaning of it, you know. And
you
this
tell
is what keeps me going. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. Could you tell us a little bit more about the shorties and how the role they play between the different scales and sizes of your work?
The shorties are about 6 to 7 inches tall, and they have to do with the Black experience about teasing each other and name calling, and you know, like I started making shorties. I had a series called Juke Junk Shorty, where they would go to the juke junk and or cornbread shorty and different things like that. And they're fun, you know. And I even made shorties that are smile. All my things are not angry or mean, you know. So the shorties are fun, you know, and that's another price range that most people can afford. And you know, it's got, for me, I want everyone to have a jug, you know, and so I have to do it so they can have a jug, you know. That's why I make the shorties, you know. Okay. Anything else?
Hi there, this is Stacy and John. We're art teachers in Champaign, and
Yeah.
we are kind of freaking out because we're so excited to just hear from you. We're big fans and have been for a long time.
Okay.
We both are working with elementary age students, and we have a very diverse district here in Champaign, including a high Congolese population. What would you want us to most impart to our students about your work when we present it?
That it's our people.
Yeah.
You know, I do a lot of teaching in residencies, and when I get the Black children, and the teachers has usually told me, said, this group of kids is going to act up. I said, they won't do it for me because I'm not taking you to the office. I'm going to your mother's house and talk to her. I use that. But the main thing is to tell them that this is you. This is your people, and this is how they interpret this thing. Usually when I go into schools, you know, you got this challenge, you know, they don't really want to hear you, but I'm loud, I'm vexatious, I'm in your face. I have a lesson plan, but the lesson plan is out the window in 5 minutes because they don't want to do that. One of the last residences I did, I made out slab about 14 by 14, and everyone was sitting around the slab. We was going to make tiles. This one little boy who wasn't in the class came in and walked through the slab. So I changed. Everyone has to walk through it. Now the impressions on the feet is on the tile, and it's one of the best tile installations I ever had. You know, so you have to adapt, and so you have to teach them that. They took impure materials, they adapted, they learned how to teach them about the food, teach them about the music. You know, when I go to do the residence especially with the Black children, I'll take my guitar, you're gonna learn Wade in the Water, you're gonna learn all these songs. Well, I'm gonna take greens and collard greens and things and teach you eat. I'm gonna teach you dancing, because in my movement with the doing face jug, I got music playing. I do movement. Sometimes the movement calls something inside of me to come out. So with the Black children, you got to get them involved. I do an exercise called Mr. Potato Head. Everyone has 2 softball pieces of clay. One is on the ground. And then you have to go these movements and put your hand together and do all this. It's like Simon says, you do 2 pieces. And then at the end, you slap them together and go, ha! And then you sit down and you put the face on, you put the pencil on, because Mr. Potato Head is going to college with you. You know, so they'll make you do your daggone homework. So, I mean, I get them started moving because I'm not much of a talker when it comes to lecturing. I don't know how you evaluate this lecture, but I like to be with them. I like to interact with them, and then they show me things. They don't have a clue that you can't make a submarine out of clay, but you know what? About 10 years ago, we were in a school and I had 30 kids and we made a submarine. And we cut it apart. They made the decks and the missile bays and everything. So kids don't know. All our job is to teach them how to do the basic thing, how to score it and slip it, how to fire it, how to glaze it so we wax the bottom. You know, that's it. But challenge them. Put it out there. Don't let them set back. Because I had an art teacher when I was in the 3rd grade. White teacher came to school and she gave us a ball of clay. Everybody else in the class was making snakes and something stupid. I took the popsicle stick and carved a bird on a rock. And everybody was saying, oh, you crazy. The class was leaving. She grabbed me in my chest. She said, you're an artist. And I'm going to tell all the teachers in the school that you're an artist and not let you fall down into that mess. And that's what saved me. And so you got to identify that kid who's sitting over the corner and waiting for somebody to grab him and bring him up front and make him a leader, because they want to achieve, but we got to step out. We got to step out of the box. I know as an artist in residence, I was not mandated by the state to follow their rules. I'm a child care worker, so I'm going to take care of this child for the next 10 days. They tell me things that they haven't told nobody, you know. So I mean, just challenge them. That's all. Tell them to look at the history detective program I did. I got a lot of stuff online. Look at it and, you know, and call me, write me, because they'll send me pictures. I'll tell them. I like to respond to the children because they're the future.
Jim, you have a question from the chat.
Okay.
So someone's wondering what helps make you feel empower you to showcase this emotional vulnerability. How are you so emotionally available in your work and your discussions about it?
That's a very good question. You know, when I first started making the jugs, I was like just cranking them out. Now, the reading and the things I see on TV and the things I read and things and the emotions are in me, and I take them and put it into the jug. I can't describe how to do it, but different scenarios, different things show up.
Could you give a couple examples, maybe?
What now?
Could you give a couple examples, maybe?
Yeah, I got one right here. This is an African Maasai warrior. And this one is called the Lion and the Lamb. In order for him to become man, he had to kill a lion. And so the teeth represent the lion's teeth. One of the things that the scarification had to do with actually scarring, actually cutting their flesh and putting cowrie shells in their skin. So it was a rite of passage. We don't have that anymore, but I mean, that's what I do. And I try to find out different tribes that do that. We really don't have that, but emotionally, I have to be connected to my work. That's why sometimes I have to step away because I'm too involved with it. But it's not hard, but it's significant in that when you make it and you send it, it goes out there, people feel that energy in their house. I've had people write us and tell us, wow, you know, and I tell my jokes, when you get to the house, you better be good, you know. Okay. Any more?
What figures are you thinking about next, Jim? Who are you contemplating or working on?
Oh my gosh.
Who are you researching?
Whoa. Which one? Well, I just did Billie Holiday, but I did the Billie Holiday with the flower and the song, you know. But then I did Billie Holiday, Southern Trees Bear Strange Fruit. It looks like tree trunk with branches. And on the branches are hung Black people. So I'm doing that one. I'm just working on one the other day. Last week, we went to a club and we saw a young man who was talking about, singing about the angel done bowed down. I just finished the angel done bowed down. So, I mean, I'm always thinking about what's next. I don't preconceive what I'm gonna make. I don't draw it out. I make a body. And Randy will tell you, I make a body, however size it is. And then the first thing I do is put the nose on. And after the nose goes on, then the ideas start to flow. The ideas start to flow. And then from there, I can create what I want to make. When I worked on the angels done bowed down, because the wings are so big and it comes around the front and hides, it took me 3 days to do this the way I wanted to do it. And, you know, and now as I'm being able to have jugs and they're going for quite a bit of income, I'm able to take my time with them. So that's the part that I have to do. And, you know, but I don't preconceive, and I do write down things. Jan gets so upset with me. I have little slips of paper all over the house. Got a name on it, got an idea, I guess, and I can't keep it together. I'm not organized at all. Somebody needs to come here and help me. Because I'm not. But I mean, I love it, and it's still exciting to me to be chosen to be one who can make a face jug, and that people recognize it and see it and value it. And I give a shout out to the Krannert. They bought that jug for me. I had never sold a jug to a museum before. And now I sold one to somebody in a museum in Los Angeles, right? Yeah, 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 Black Museum. And so I mean, it's hilarious. But I'm doing it because I have to do it. I have to do it. Yeah.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember me. I went to North Carolina and emailed you and was like, I'm going to be in the area. And you said, come on over to my house. And I went in your backyard and you talked to my kids, and I've been using that history detective video for about 10 years. And,
Okay.
And you sent up work with me and glaze, and you had my students glaze it. And it's, you know, that jug is probably on display in my classroom still. We're still using that for everything. So it's not really a question, but just an appreciation for your generosity and your kindness.
I appreciate that. I mean, when you come to my house, I got to show you everything. And then also, Jen, sometimes every time people come, I want to feed them too, because I mean that's part of the culture. You know? Don't give me a watercress sandwich. Give me some barbecue, some chicken or something. Thank you so much.
Were there any more questions from the crowd? Thank you, Jim. We're about at our 15-minute mark for your Q&A session.
Okay, that's
Was there anything else you want to add that got recalled from talking some more?
I just want to thank everyone, Maureen at the museum, and you and everyone who contributed and came in. This was the first time I ever did a lecture. I don't know if this counts as a lecture. I don't know. It was fun. I really liked it. Of course, I'm a hands-on. I want to be where you are. And I think I do better with the wheel, you know, and talking. But this was fun. I liked it. And thank you guys so much, so much. And, you know, if you want to call me, write me, I'm accessible. I have no one screening my calls, okay? Write me, call me, whatever. And I'll share recipes and ideas and everything with you, okay?
Blackpotter.com.
Yeah, blackpotter.com. Yeah. They want me to come to the campus. Yeah, I'll come. Just tell me how. Okay. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much.
Okay.